Hi, everyone. Welcome to Ask a Therapist. I'm Michelle Smith. I've been a mental health therapist now for over 15 years. I am also a mother of a 22-year-old who's off in college, and I'm a writer and enjoy traveling. So that's a little bit about me. And ask a therapist. You can hang out with me or you can ask me questions about mental health, relationships, and parenting. So I'll be watching our chat to be seeing if anybody has any questions about mental health, relationships, or parenting. On one of my videos, I did get a question. What happens when one gets defensive and upset when you talk about how you feel? Can you possibly talk about how to heal from all that kind of stuff? I've been struggling lately with my CPTSD and depression. Thank you for sharing these always. So first of all, the CPTSD just stands for chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. Most people hear about PTSD, so the C just adds um, the word chronic to it. It basically just means it's long lasting. It's not something that's short, what they refer to as acute symptoms. So, talking a little bit about the piece of defensiveness. So, defensiveness is actually one of what's called the four horsemen. I'm trained in the Gottman method for couples therapy. So, when I'm doing couples therapy, that's the framework that I use to understand the relationship dynamics and how to teach them skills and role play different situations to be able to improve communication. So talking about defensiveness, like I said, it's one of the four horsemen. Those are the main predictors of divorce, and it's with a surprisingly high accuracy that clinicians and researchers can actually predict whether a couple is going to get divorced. So those main four predictors, what the Gottman Institute refers to as the four horsemen of the apocalypse, basically that they're going to end your marriage, are criticism, so criticizing your partner, defensiveness, so becoming defensive when concerns are addressed, contempt, that can be things like disrespectful behaviors, having a lot of anger, resentment towards your partner. You may be sarcastic, have some eye rolling, make fun of one another. So there might be kind of some passive aggressiveness going on. And then the last of the four horsemen is stonewalling, which is basically refusing to talk about the situation, shutting down, or giving silent treatment as a way to avoid conflict. So, none of those are healthy in a relationship or a marriage. Thankfully, there are antidotes to those main four predictors of divorce. So, there's ways to replace those unhealthy communication patterns with healthier ways to communicate and express with others. The first one, so the antidote to criticism is use a gentle startup. Normally, that's things like using I feel statements. And then we'll talk about this one in greater depth during our conversation since we'll be focusing on defensiveness, since that's what the question was about. The antidote to defensiveness is taking responsibility. So own your behavior, own your actions, own how, whether you intended to or not, your actions may have triggered some feelings in your partner. The antidote to contempt is describe your own feelings and needs. Don't describe your partner. So, really focus on yourself, how you're feeling, and what you're needing in that situation. And that would be a topic for a whole nother live. We won't delve into that today. And then the antidote to stonewalling is to do some self soothing. So, using some relaxation techniques to be able to calm yourself while having hard conversations. So, whether that's deep breathing or asking to take a time out and doing some progressive muscle relaxation, come back in 15 minutes when you are calmer and revisit the conversation at hand. So, those are the four horsemen. And like I said, since the question I received had to do with defensiveness, I want to address that one in more depth. So, defensiveness is a form of self protection. It tends to happen when we perceive that we're being attacked. Whether we truly are being attacked or not, we're perceiving that we're being attacked. So, people become defensive when, like, a criticism seems like they're it's becoming or turning into an attack. And then normally the person who becomes defensive, they kind of turn it around and then blame their partner. So it's put back on their partner instead of accepting responsibility for your actions. So an example of that is, and this is coming from the Gottman Institute. So an example could be, did you call your parents to let them know that we're not coming tonight as you promised this morning? Simple question, right? Like, just following up on a conversation they had this morning when it's later in the day, like, hey, did you remember to call your parents and let them know we're not going to be there? So when the partner becomes defensive, they might respond with, I was just too busy today. You know how busy my schedule is. Why didn't you just do it? Well, and obviously the partner didn't do it because they said they were going to. Um, so you could definitely ask if you were busy if your partner could do it, but it was definitely a defensive sort of response. Um, so some of the antidotes to defensiveness, one, we can help our partners to not get defensive when we discuss conflict by using that gentle startup because it is a response or tends to be a response to criticism. So making sure to be gentle when asking questions can help prevent our partner from becoming defensive to begin with. Then the other piece to help yourself to not become defensive is to accept responsibility. So, in that same situation where one partner asks the other, did you call your parents to let them know that we're not coming tonight as you promised this morning? When we're using the antidote, the partner may respond with, oops, I forgot. I should have asked you this morning to do it because I knew my day would be too busy. Let me call them right now. So you can hear the difference between those responses. With the defensive response, it was, I was too busy. You know how busy my schedule is. Why didn't you just do it? Versus accepting responsibility of, oh, I forgot. I should have asked you to do it this morning, but then did call their parents at that moment in time. So it definitely helps to continue the conversation, and the question was more of a friendly reminder and just following up from the conversation in the morning than truly an attack. So when you're able to perceive and accept responsibility for your actions, you can see situations a little bit more clearly. um So you can ask yourself, when you're trying to figure out how to respond in a conversation, ask yourself, like, what's the goal in the situation? What's the real problem underlying the conflict? So typically, there's a lot of things under the surface in relationship dynamics. So it can really help to fully pause and figure out what you're really upset about, or kind of understanding your partner's intent too. That typically our partners aren't meaning to provoke us or upset us. Typically, they're just trying to express how they're feeling, or like in that example, just a simple reminder of, hey, did you do this? So you can kind of ask yourself, take a pause and ask yourself that. You can understand defensiveness. Usually, when we become defensive in a conversation, we're reacting to their words without truly listening to what they're saying. So you're kind of listening to respond instead of listening to hear. So when you pause and use some active listening skills, you're more likely to hear what your partner is actually telling you or what they're meaning behind their words. So you may be able to see things like they're not an attack, so we don't have to be defensive. And we can be more understanding and accept that responsibility in the situation. And we can remember our nonverbal communication as well. So sometimes we don't understand how we're coming across with our nonverbal cues. We can't see ourselves. We're not constantly walking around holding up a mirror to see how we're coming across. We're not always on camera to be able to see our nonverbals. So sometimes we just need to be mindful and maybe ask for some feedback too, of maybe like if our partner lets us know or asks, like, hey, why'd you roll your eyes at me? And you didn't even realize you were doing that. Like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize that. Thank you for pointing that out to me. I didn't mean to do that. I don't mean to be dismissive of what you're saying. So also, truly stopping eye rolling sort of behavior, because that is a form of disrespect. So that's one way, watch your nonverbal communication, and that can help prevent and ward off some defensiveness as well of how we're communicating. So, watching our tone, our body language, those facial expressions, and any other sort of cues. I talk sometimes about being distracted. If somebody has their phone in their face, it's pretty clear that they're not listening to what you have to say, or if they are, they're only picking up pieces of what you're saying. They're not picking up the entire conversation. So it can be helpful in those cases to put down electronics when you want to have a deeper conversation. I talk about that part too when I'm doing couples therapy, is with electronics, kind of building on that piece. I encourage people, don't have hard conversations through electronics. Texting conversations can blow up really easy. Sometimes even phone conversations blow up, because things are misunderstood and you're not getting those nonverbal pieces of communication, like the voice tone, the body language, the genuine concern that a person has as they're sharing feelings or talking about things. So it's a lot more likely that conversations will escalate if you're texting back and forth instead of face to face. Sometimes couples are a distance apart, so whether they're in a long distance relationship, or one partner's on vacation, the other one's at home, or they're away for a job or whatever. In those situations, I encourage like this, like doing a FaceTime, a video chat, Zoom, whatever you have to be able to communicate with people, because then you can still at least see some nonverbals. It's still not quite as good as face to face communication, but it's much better than going at it with your partner in arguments over like texting, phone calls, things like that. So that's a way to prevent some defensiveness too, is have face to face conversations, especially if you know it's going to be a hard conversation. So, those are some tips to address defensiveness. Some other things that the Gottman Institute talks about. I love this one. Let go of being right. Focus just on problem solving the situation together. So we let go of being right. It's we all have good ideas. We wouldn't be in a relationship with the partner we're with if we didn't care about them and if we didn't think they had some good ideas. So we can let go of being right and just focus on solving the problem. So that helps with defensiveness. Change your body, like your physiology. So, I talked about a little bit ago taking a break if you're becoming too overwhelmed during a time of conflict. So, if you take and communicate that you need a 15-minute break to calm down and then come back, you can actually do some physical sort of things during that time, like do some jumping jacks, go for a quick walk around the block, just kind of anything to get your body going. And that helps us to reduce defensiveness too. It kind of shifts our energy a little bit. We can also use a code word or gesture that means we're getting off track. Let's start again. Usually, couples have really good ideas for those code words. They're different in every situation. I don't have one code word in particular that I go to. I typically just ask couples, and they have some sort of cute little inside joke that they can use with themselves to get themselves back on track. So I like doing that one. There's definitely some effectiveness to having that code word. You can stop, breathe, and count to 3. I do this one a lot, maybe not the counting piece, but I stop and take a deep breath a lot of times during hard conversations. It gives me a time to think about what I truly want to say and how I want to respond, especially in a difficult, challenging conversation. So, when we're taking responsibility, as we talked about, we want to um, kind of own your mistakes. So take responsibility, be accountable for your behavior. The facts are the facts. None of us are perfect. So just own it. Just own, hey, I made a mistake. I'm sorry I made a mistake. I'm human. I'm going to do my best to make it right, though. I don't know if you forgot. Yeah, they use the example. Yes, I did forget the cat food. You're supposed to pick up cat food after work or when you went to the grocery store, and you forgot the cat food. So just don't. I'm so sorry I forgot to pick up the cat food. I guess I have to go back to the store, or, you could problem solve it. Maybe I can pick it up tomorrow on my way to work. Practice kind speech, both in words and with the tone that you're using. I've done this before in different situations. Before having a conversation, technically in the way I used it, it was before doing some public speaking. I record myself and see how I sound. It's very uncomfortable to see yourself and listen to yourself, but it is helpful because you can see how you're coming across. You can hear it in your voice tone. So you can do that like with a friend too. Like, hey, I want to have a hard conversation with my partner. Would you mind if I just practiced with you? You can also practice like with your therapist. I have lots of people practice how to have hard conversations during therapy sessions with me, where I'll be their partner and hear how they come across and then maybe give some suggestions of how they could say it and come across kinder with more compassion while still being assertive. Because it is important to be able to communicate and express what you need. So, if you are the attacker and your partner is becoming defensive, be mindful of your tone of voice and really go back and visit that gentle startup. So, be gentle, especially if you're having a hard conversation. One of the things I talk about with people too, I don't like to bombard other people because I don't like to be bombarded. So if I know that I want to have a hard conversation with someone, especially someone I care about, but even kind of everybody I do this with of, hey, I'd like to talk about blah blah blah, whatever the subject is. Um I'd like to talk about I'd like to talk more about the conversation we had last night. Can we schedule a time to do that? Or let's schedule a time to do that. Let's schedule a time to do that's a little bit more assertive. And I really like having a scheduled time because both partners can be prepared to have the conversation. And if you give some sort of idea of what you want to talk about, they can kind of prepare for that conversation as well. Sometimes you're not sure exactly where conversations are going to go. Sometimes it's more you're kind of talking about how you're feeling. So you might not be able to give a full heads up between the time you ask, but at least some sort of heads up like, hey, I'd like to have a conversation where we talk about feelings. I'd like to share some of my feelings with you. Then at least there's some sort of idea of what the conversation is going to be about. And then both partners are a little bit more prepared. I like that. Like I said, I don't like to be bombarded. You're not going to get my best self, and I'm not going to respond with in the way that I want to be soft, compassionate, really hear your concerns if I'm caught off guard. So, even with myself, people are going to get a much better response from me if I have time to think and process and prepare. So, I mean, that's on me too, to know myself and be able to communicate that. That if someone does come with me at it like with a concern and I was caught off guard, I'll slow things down and just kind of say something like, hey, I need some time to process that, but let's schedule a time soon to talk about it. And then you can revisit it. So that can help diffuse some defensiveness as well. And if you make a mistake, do repair. Repairing a mistake is basically apologizing and making it right. So, I'm sorry I forgot the cat food. Let me run back to the store quick. I'll be back in another 10 minutes. I'm so sorry I forgot the cat food. And then that keeps the relationship going so things don't build up. Being defensive prevents people from completely working through the conflict, so it's more likely to build over time. All right, well, that's the information that I wanted to share about defensiveness today after the question that I received. I'll give some space, a couple minutes, if anybody watching has some questions about any topic with mental health, relationships, or parenting, and I'll answer those quick. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions from anybody. Feel free to send me a direct message if anything does come up between now and the next Ask a Therapist. My next live, I'm doing them once a month. Here we go. Here's my planner. I was intending to do them on Wednesday afternoons, but this month I had to shift to a Tuesday afternoon. So I may just end up shifting them to Tuesday afternoons. And I still have a couple planners going at the same time. I'll figure it out and kind of get back to everybody. Hopefully, you'll see and know when my next Ask a Therapist is, but it'll be in February. So feel free to send me a direct message or share a comment on one of my posts or notes. And like I did today, I will answer your question as thoroughly as possible. All right. Well, thanks for being here on Ask a Therapist Live. Again, my name's Michelle. I've been a mental health therapist for 15 years, and you can ask me any questions that you'd like about mental health, relationships, and parenting. Thank you again for being here, and I'm sending you peace and hope until next time. Thanks so much, friends. Bye.